S-Chan presents Educational Video Lectures. Difficult concepts made easy. Study anywhere, anytime.
Welcome students. As we have discussed about the communication and how communication is done with the different communication media and the different communication channels and all. So today we will discuss more about the modulation in this video.
If you want to study this topic in detail, refer to the book by S-Chan Publishing. Link is provided in the description box.
Welcome to the S-Chan Academy. My name is Kanhaiya Jha, and today we will discuss about a very important concept in the wave propagation, which is called as a modulation. That what is the modulation? How in the particular signal we can analyze the different kind of modulation. Either it is a amplitude modulation, or it is a frequency modulation, or it is a phase modulation. So how we can analyze the different kind of modulation in the particular channel. So modulation, as we say, that encoding information from the message source in a way that is suitable for a transmission by changing the parameters of the carrier signal. Basically, in a very layman language, the machine, or suppose we are using a television, the television has an antenna. The antenna will send a carrier wave. That carrier wave will overlap with a target wave, then it comes to a television, and then we say that the modulation is done. Let's take the example of here, that suppose this is a television here. This television has a antenna. This television has an antenna, and this is also has an antenna where we get a signal. So this will send a carrier wave, and this is a target wave. So when we say that the carrier wave and the target wave overlap each other. So when a carrier wave and the target wave overlap with each other, then we say the modulation is done. So here we can see that how the modulation is done. Here we can see that this is the modulator, this is the carrier, this is the amplitude modulation, frequency modulation. We will discuss the amplitude modulation, frequency modulation. So we can say that a modulation is basically the overlapping of the carrier wave and the target wave. Why modulation is important? This is a very important concept of the communication, because if the modulation will not happen, then the communication will not be completed. So the modulation is important because when a particular electrical machine will send a carrier wave, and that carrier wave will overlap with a target wave. When that particular carrier wave will overlap with a target wave, then we say that the communication is generally done. So if the overlapping of the carrier wave and the target wave will not take place, if the overlapping of the carrier wave and the target wave will not take place, then the modulation cannot be done and the communication cannot be processed. So we say that it is a process in which the particular modulation, overlapping of the carrier wave and the target wave is done. If you see the particular wave here, if you see the particular wave, we know that this is the amplitude and this is the frequency. So when the amplitude, the modulation is happening in the amplitude of the particular signal, we say that it is amplitude modulation. When it is happening in the particular frequency, we say frequency modulation. When it is happening in a particular phase, we say that phase modulation. So we will study three things. One is the amplitude modulation, the another one is a frequency modulation, and then phase modulation. So amplitude modulation, as the name says amplitude, it will in the amplitude of the particular signal. Here we can see that it will be in the amplitude of the particular signal. We can see here amplitude of the particular signal. Here we can see that it is increasing or decreasing here. Then we have frequency modulation. The frequency modulation will happen in the frequency, like FM is very common that we heard nowadays in the radio, FM radio. There is frequency modulation. We set at a different frequency. When we set the FM at a different frequency, then we generally heard the different channels. So at a different frequency, when they are set, then they are generally used in the particular different channels. So basically we have amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and if it is happening in a particular phase, then it is called as a phase modulation. So this is the three types which is happening here. Then we have an important concept which is called as first time modulation. Time modulation, or we say duration modulation. Duration modulation. So what is the time modulation is that, suppose this signal processed from the time t to t0 to the time t to t1. Okay. So the signal process from the time t0 to the t1. So between this particular time, if we want to calculate the modulation for a particular time, or from one time to another for a particular duration, then that modulation is called as a time modulation or the duration modulation. So when it is happening in the phase, it is called as a phase time modulation or the phase duration modulation. When it is happening in the particular amplitude, it is called as the amplitude time modulation ATM or the amplitude duration modulation, or it is happening in a particular frequency, then it is a frequency modulation or a frequency duration modulation. So basically we say ATM is a amplitude time modulation, frequency time modulation, phase time modulation, or we can say it for the duration modulation and all. So for a particular time we can also calculate the modulation, for a particular duration also we can also call it as a modulation, calculate the modulation. Then we have the importance of modulation, that why we need the modulation. So we have discussed that the baseband signals are incompatible for a different transmission. For such a signal to travel longer distance, its strength has to be increased by the modulation with a higher frequency carrier wave, which does not affect the parameter of the modulation signal. So as we have discussed that the carrier wave is sent, and when the carrier wave overlaps with the target wave, when the carrier wave generally overlaps with the target wave, then the communication is done. So we are saying that a system has a weak signal, then when system is propagated from the one part to the another part, then that particular carrier wave gets overlapped with the target wave, and then we get the communication system. So advantages, so antenna size get reduced, no signal mixing occurs, we can say the noise factor is decreased, the distortion factor is decreased. When we are sending a particular signal to get a signal, in that case the antennas are reduced and the distortion factor in the signal is reduced a lot, because we observe here that in the modulation, when the two waves overlap with each other, we get the target wave accurately. Communication range increases because we are already giving a wave which will bring another wave, the range will annually increase. Multiplexing of signals occur, adjustment in the bandwidth is allowed, and the reception quality improves. So when the distortion factor is less, yes, the reception quality improves. So from the transmitter to the receiver, initially what we have studied is that there is a communication system taking place. Where communication system taking place, different communications are generally done. When the different communications are generally done without sending a signal, then the distortion factor or the noise factor was more. But when we are using the modulation, when we are sending a particular carrier wave, and that particular carrier wave will overlap with the target wave. In that particular case, the distortion factor will become very less. When the distortion factor will become very less and the particular noise factor will become very less, yes, the quality of the output will generally increase. So modulation, as we have studied, can be done in the amplitude. The modulation can be done in terms of the phase, in terms of the frequency. Modulation can be done in terms of the particular time, that we know the initial time and we know the final time. So at a particular time, the modulation can be done. We can fix a particular range of time, which is called the duration of modulation. In that particular duration also, the modulation can be done. We can do the modulation when there are changes occurring. That is called as a delta modulation. So when the waves are changing from the one form to another form, then we say that in that case also the modulation can be done. That is called as a delta modulation. It can be done in amplitude delta modulation also. It can be done in the frequency delta modulation. It can be done in the phase delta modulation. So if a particular signal is going through a change, in that case we can calculate the delta modulation also. And delta modulation can be done in terms of the amplitude, phase and the frequency. So we have discussed that how a particular carrier wave is sent and how we can categorize into different categories of the particular carrier wave. At the end, it will overlap with the target wave and we say the communication system is done. Now we'll discuss what is the AM modulation. AM modulation, we have discussed that this is the crest and this is the trough. As we know that this is the top cycle and this is the bottom cycle. Now what happens that when the modulation will be done at the top cycle and the bottom cycle, or between the crest and the trough in the amplitude of the particular signal, the modulation occurring is called as the amplitude modulation. The modulation occurring here is called as the amplitude modulation. So you can see that this is the modulation occurring here. So this is basically change in the amplitude of the particular signal, that when we have a signal and we are supposed to calculate the changes in the amplitude of the particular signal, then we can calculate this. Then we have application of AM and FM modulation, application of the amplitude modulation used for broadcasting in the long wave or a medium wave. Then the very high frequency VHF transmission is processed by the AM, radio communication with a very high frequency. And a special type of the AM is quadrilateral amplitude modulation. It is used for a data transmission for a short range transmitter to the cellular communication. Then we have application for the FM. The frequency modulation can be used for the broadcasting of the FM radio. Okay, this is help in the larger signal to noise ratio. It is also used in the music synthesis, some systems that use video transmission and also used for the magnetic tape recording system. Then telemetry, radar and the seismic prospecting. Seismic is basically that how we, in the seismology, that how we calculate and predict the seismology, and the meteorological department are using a lot for this. Then EEG monitoring of the newborn, etc. So this is a technique of the particular frequency modulation. So frequency modulation do not have the application in the telecommunication. It has a application in the medicine and the weather broadcasting also. How we generally censor the seismic and then it will be used for the EEG for the newly born babies. So frequency modulation has a more application in day-to-day life than the amplitude modulation, because in the given frequency or in the particular change in the particular frequency, we are making the calculation. Then we have the FM modulation. Initially we have seen the changes in the crest and the trough. Here what we are observing here in the frequency, as we have discussed earlier, the frequency is the number of rotation the wave takes, the number of the vibration per second. So we can see here that the modulation is occurring in terms of the frequency of the particular given signal. That a signal is changing with a particular frequency and the modulation is occurring in the particular frequency of the particular signal. So we have discussed what is AM, we have discussed what is a FM and how these are important, how the amplitude modulation is important, how the frequency modulation is important and why modulation is important. We have discussed Modulation is overlapping of the carrier wave and the target wave. It can be done with the amplitude, it can be done with the phase, it can be done with the frequency. We have studied that it can be done with a particular time, it can be done with a particular frequency, particular changes, a particular time duration. And how FM is useful not in the telecommunication but in the medicine and in the other particular departments also. Now we'll take a small break, then we will continue.
Now quality learning is easily available at your doorstep. S. Chand Academy brings detailed lectures based on AICTE curriculum as per the New Education Policy 2020. So do not forget to subscribe to the S. Chand Academy and access the wide world of knowledge conveniently sitting at your home. Stay connected and keep watching S. Chand Academy. Happy learning!
Students, welcome back. As we have discussed before the break that what is a modulation, what is the amplitude modulation, what is a phase modulation, and what is a frequency modulation. We have discussed the different parts of the modulation. So now we'll proceed further and we'll discuss the different terms related with the wave. So we have three basic terms related with the wave. The first term is amplitude, the second term is a frequency, and the third term is called as phase. So let's understand it one by one in a very basic thing. So this is the wave that we make. Okay, we have discussed earlier also. The difference between, this is the top cycle and this is the bottom cycle. So the difference between the top cycle and the bottom cycle. The difference between the top cycle and the bottom cycle is basically the amplitude. And then we can say that the difference between the compression or the difference between the release. So we can say that either the waves are compressed or they are released. The difference between them is called as a frequency. And then depend upon the side of the mean, they are in which side of the mean point, that depends upon that is called as a phase. So we have three particular categories here. One is the amplitude, second one is the frequency, and then phase. The height of the wave is the amplitude. Number of the waves which is passing through the given second is called as a frequency, and then where the phase is at any given moment is called as a phase. So the modulation signal, we have discussed what is a carrier wave, what is a modulated wave. Carrier wave is the wave that we send it from our machine, and the target wave is there. And when the carrier wave and the target wave overlap each other, we say that is the modulating signal. Then we have mobile communication, two aspects of mobility, user mobility. User mobility for the wireless. Wireless, we can say that anytime, anywhere we can make the wireless phone. So now we can use it at any part. We are using a local area network, and we are connecting the local area network. We are using the internet also. Internet, we can be located at any time, anywhere. Let's take a one live example that 10 years back, when we have to talk from India to someone who is in US, we have to pay a lot. But nowadays what we are doing is we are talking on the WhatsApp because our mobile phone is connected with the network and we are paying nothing, because every network is working together. So if we want to switch to any particular network, then we can do that, and we can access any network from any particular network. If we are on a particular network and to want to access any network, we can do that. So this is one of the very good example that we can make call to anywhere in the world without any extra cost, because our phone is now connected to the internet. Then we have vehicles that are using GPS, global positioning system. We can locate the particular vehicle also. If we have a GPS with a particular vehicle, for the security we can locate that particular vehicle anywhere, anytime, and we can predict that where the vehicle is going. If there is some theft, then also we can recover it, And for the security purpose also, we can have a GPS, which generally indicates that anytime we can locate that where the vehicle is generally moving. Then we have local network vehicle, then we have vehicle data. So on a given data, we can make the vehicle number and the different vehicle data, and every time we can locate the position of the particular vehicle. So in a very summary, what we can say that if we make the data of a particular device and then we fix it on a particular telecommunication network, then we can easily locate it. There are many things that we can do it for the global positioning. Nowadays, even the watch that we wear are also with the GPS. Mainly they were developed for the school students, for girls basically, for their security purpose, that just GPS watch, we can predict the watch where it is and predict the student if there is any kind of mishappen. So GPS, what actually GPS is that we generate a code, we generate a signal, and then we put on the telecommunication network. After that, we can locate that signal anytime. So this is the GPS, global positioning system. So we can allocate the particular position. Then it can be used for the early transmission of patient data to the hospital, replacement of fixed infrastructure in case of earthquake. So every data is there, and we can predict the earthquake also. We can calculate it that there are chances of the earthquake and all that. So this all can be done with this. Then we have location dependent devices. So location dependent devices, we have printers, fax, phone. Nowadays we are not using fax. We are sending all the particular data with the mobile technology. Then server, yes, we have made a small server at home also. Suppose that at any home they are using 4 computers. The 4 computers can be connected with each other. We can make a small server. We can use a router and we can make a small server to do it. Then we have information services, push, pull, then the different memory types. Then we have the device portability. Device can be taken from any point to any point and there is a loss of data. So data can also be recovered. Nowadays, if you remember yourself, if you want to operate any mobile phone, the first thing we need is an email ID. Without that, we cannot use it. That particular ID is generally used to recover the particular data. So along with the particular device, the network is capable of recovering the particular data also. Not only we can recover the particular device from the if it is lost or any mishappen, but we can also recover the data which is also lost. We can recover that particular data also. So we can recover both the things. Then we have wireless network. Wireless network, the range is very high, high loss rate in the sense that distortion factor is less. Then we have low transmission rates, higher delays, lower security, simpler active tracking, and always shared medium. So when the device is basically shared on a particular network, then it is basically accessible to all particular network. Either we want to access the particular data, or if any theft, we can access the particular device also. But yes, every time to access the particular data, either we need a server or we need a permission from the particular server. Then we have mobile communication, we have wireless communication. In transmission quality, bandwidth is improved, error rate is reduced, delay is reduced, modulation factor is increased. Then mobility, location dependent services, location transparency, and the quality of the service support. And then the power consumption is defined in every communication, that what is the power consumption, how we are going to deal with the particular power consumption and all. So this is what we have to study in this communication. What the most important thing that we need to understand here is a network security. Along with the network security, the 2 more security that we need, equipment security and the data security. That in a particular network, when we can swap the one particular network with a different networks, when we can swap the different networks, suppose we take an example here, that if this is the one particular network A, then it is B, then it is C and D. So it doesn't mean that I am working with a A-type network, then I can process the data or I can make the calling with the A-type network. I can do and process the network with any kind of network. I can do it. I can do with A, I can do with B, I can do with C, and I can do with D. So any particular data network I can process and do it. This is what a network swapping is. So in this network swapping, what we have to remember and focus is that the data is secured and the equipment is also secured. So in our studies we have done that how this secure is really done. So basically this is the portability that we have done, then the location dependent services. So these are all the things that are used with the communication and how these are important. So in a very summary picture, what we need to study is that how the equipment security is important, how the network security is important, how along with the network security data security is important, how can we locate a mobile when it is theft, how we can generate a signal with any particular device, and along with the GPS we can trace that particular device. So these are all under the mobile communication, they are all under the communication systems that we are using. We started from the propagation of the wave, then we come to the devices, and then we come to the modulation. That in the modulation, how we calculate the modulation factor, and then we develop the device, and then we do all the particular wave propagation during using the modulation. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you.
If you want to study this topic in detail, refer to the book by S. John Publishing. Link is provided in the description box. If you found our video interesting, please like, share and subscribe. And do not forget to press the bell icon.
All rights reserved. This video has been prepared for educational purposes only. No part of it may be reproduced or copied without the permission of the copyright holder.